Fletcher here with you today. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Music Notes. Today we're going to start off with a story about a young boy. Maybe you can relate. We're going to talk about a little boy who was born in 1484, so he was born during the Holy Roman Empire, and he grew up in a small little village town in central Germany. He grew up listening to his mother sing. He was part of the boys' choir in the town, so he got to sing for weddings and funerals, and he was also a proficient flautist, or in his day, a recorder. And he was the eldest son in his family, so his father had high aspirations for him. He wanted his son to follow in a certain path, and of course, being the good son that he was, he followed what his father asked, and he went on to university. He ended up getting a master's degree, and then he enrolled in law school, which is what his father wanted him to do. But he wasn't really interested in law. He loved theology, and he preferred philosophy. But he was a good boy, so he went off to law school. Then while he was there, he would take trips back and forth to home, back to school. And on one such trip, when he was returning back to school on his horse, he got caught in a terrible thunderstorm. And bang, clap of thunder, lightning struck, and it scared him to death. And he was sort of trapped out there in the storm, and he cried out, "Help! Saint Anna, help! I will become a monk!" And in that moment, he took what he said so seriously. He told his father about the experience that he had had, and he was terrified of death, terrified of divine judgment, and he felt in that moment he had made a vow with God to become a monk. Okay, so maybe you can't relate to that. I kind of doubt maybe you ever wanted to become a monk. But he took his cry for help in that moment so seriously as a vow to God that this person did keep that vow, and they did become a monk for some time. So I'm sure many of you right off the bat knew exactly who I was talking about. In case you're still wondering, let's hear the song that this little boy, a long time ago, composed and wrote the lyrics to. Uncertain, let's play the same hymn again, but a little bit differently. What song was that? "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." And of course, the little boy that grew up to become a monk and then go on to do some very big things is none other than Martin Luther. All right, so Martin Luther wrote the lyrics and composed the music to "A Mighty Fortress." And after being a monk for a certain time, he went on to pursue a doctorate in theology. He received that doctorate, then he was received into the Senate of the theological faculty at the University of Wittenberg, and he spent his entire career in that position in the University of Wittenberg. Now back to the two versions that we just listened to of "A Mighty Fortress." So the first version, we call that, and if you've ever noticed in our hymnal, we've got both of these versions in here on page 656 and 657. And 656, if you look at the bottom, That says, text by Martin Luther, tune by Martin Luther. That was the first clip we listened to, and that is called the rhythmic version. Okay, so it's like syncopated. A mighty fortress is our God, a trusty shield and weapon. Okay, almost march-like, and some people theorize that maybe Martin Luther based the hymn tune on a Gregorian chant, kind of like what we found out about Thy Strong Word. But then if we flip the page, so we're on page 656, and we flip the page to 657, there is A Mighty Fortress is Our God again. This was the second version that I played for you, and that is called the isorhythmic. And basically what it's done is it has smoothed it out, so it's not quite so choppy and bold, but it's a little more melodic. A mighty fortress is our God. And the person that did that in our arrangement here, if you look at the bottom of the page, it's Johann Sebastian Bach. So about, 150 years later after the hymn was originally written, in Bach's time, he loved it and he used it in a cantata of his, and that's the version that probably most of Christians today sing, is the version that we have on 657, which is the isorhythmic version. So, enough about that. Martin Luther, as we know, as Lutherans, was a great reformer, Bible translator, political leader, preacher, theologian, but he was also a musician. And so one of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther, he wrote this in a foreword of a book, and it says, "Next to the Word of God, the noble art of music is the greatest treasure in the world. It controls our thoughts, our minds, hearts, and spirits. A person who does not regard music as a marvelous creation of God does not deserve to be called a human being. He should be permitted to hear nothing but the braying of donkeys and the grunting of hogs." Okay, that makes me laugh. I certainly agree with Martin Luther that music is a divine and marvelous creation from God. We are all blessed by it. And Martin Luther felt the same way. And so while the Protestant Reformation was going on, Luther was instrumental in restoring worship to the German church, and he worked with musicians to make new music and to revive congregational singing. And he wrote about 36 hymns. Of course, A Mighty Fortress is by far the most popular of his hymns. Now, A Mighty Fortress today has become associated with the Reformation. It's kind of thought to be the battle hymn for the Reformation. But the truth of the matter is that the Reformation, Festival of the Reformation, was not even celebrated in Luther's lifetime. So that makes you think, wow, when Luther was writing A Mighty Fortress, not sure that it truly was about the Reformation or that it was for a ceremony for the Reformation. Actually, in the sheet music that was found in Augsburg in 1529, at the top it does not say A Mighty Fortress is Our God. It reads A Hymn of Comfort. So, rather than a battle hymn, Luther intended this hymn to be one of comfort. And it is based on Psalm 46, which begins, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." So, one thing I did want to mention, for those of you that are not familiar with Martin Luther, I keep mentioning he was the great reformer and Reformation. Reformation was the time, and it's used to celebrate the commemoration of the publication of Martin Luther's 95 Theses, which was written and delivered to the church on October 31st, 1517. And Martin Luther, that was his way of expressing his protesting of the sale of indulgences in the Roman Catholic Church at that time. And so because of that, and because of his 95 Theses, a Reformation began, a different way of thinking about things, and that led to, over time, the Lutheran religion that we have today that separated off from the Catholic Church. So it was truly only after the 30 Years' War, which was from 1618 to 1648, when the Reformation was celebrated as a regular part of the church. So that took place after the 30 Years' War in Saxony, which is Luther's home region, and that's when this hymn became associated with that festival. So if it wasn't written for the Reformation, a lot of people have theories about what inspired that hymn, and there are over 7 documented theories about why, or the circumstances surrounding A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. So we're going to talk about a few of them. One is, at that time between 1521 and 1530, there were various deliberative assemblies, they called them diets, that were going on where the Holy Roman Empire would get together and deliberate what was going on in the church. At the Diet of Worms, they brought Luther forward and they wanted him to retract what he had said in his 95 Theses. And so the thought is that maybe Martin Luther wrote A Mighty Fortress for one of these assemblies. Also, between 1517 and 1525, because of what was going on and the changes within the church, Luther's focus was on the abuses of the Roman Church. And so they feel like maybe it was the start of the Reformation, but also a battle cry against the Pope and against Rome, maybe. Obviously, when Luther expressed his opinions in the 95 Theses, it caused just a lot of commotion, and a lot of people were very angry and upset with Martin Luther. So a lot of struggles came from that. There was, worries about his family or about his reputation, and then his work for the Reformation. And he felt that maybe his entire existence was at stake. Specifically, in 1527, Martin Luther had a very, very hard year on the personal front. He was going through a lot of temptations and trials. He wrote and documented that. A very dear friend of his, Leonard Kaiser, who followed Luther's teachings, was martyred. In the fall of 1527, in Wittenberg, a plague broke out, and it was devastating. Also in December 1527, what should have been a wonderful time for Martin Luther, his daughter was born, but she was born and she was quite ill and sickly, and by May of the following year, she died. So Martin Luther was going through a lot of struggles, and possibly, again, the title of the song was originally A Hymn of Comfort. He was looking for comfort. The challenge that was going on in the Reformation was not just his 95 Theses and his viewpoints. There were a great many people that were reading the Bible and interpreting it their way, and that was a little different than what was going on or how the Roman Catholic Church was interpreting things in the Bible. And aside from Luther, there were other groups of reformers, and some were saying, Luther, we need to revolt, and we need to revolt against the government. Well, Luther, he didn't write those theses as a means of a giant protest, or I want to revolt and break off and create a new separate religion. He was just expressing his angst and his view of how he read the scriptures true to every word. And so he wasn't one to go and revolt against the government, so he did not approve of that. Then there were other people out there that felt like pastors weren't even necessary, and they believed that anyone could proclaim the word of God. Then there was another faction that thought infants shouldn't be baptized. And then finally, One of the greatest and most divisive controversies among the reformers that took place at this time is called the sacramentarian controversy, and that was the fight over the Lord's Supper. And I found this one to be most interesting. And this morning I just took the sacrament at church for the first time since we've been away from church for a while. And after reading all of this about Martin Luther and what was going on at the time, it was particularly meaningful for me. So next time you are taking communion, remember this controversy that I'm about to discuss and the words of A Mighty Fortress, and you'll kind of see it in a different light. So at the time, people argued that Jesus could not really mean what he said, and that the words, "This is my body, this is my blood," needed to be understood in a different way. And at the time, there were several hundred different interpretations of what Jesus meant. And that started appearing, and they were all denying that Jesus actually gave his body and his blood to eat and drink at the Lord's Supper. And Luther saw this controversy as directly related to the proclamation of the gospel. And he believed, as we do, we follow Martin Luther's words here, the literal words that Jesus said and confessed, they need to be defended. So we as Lutherans believe in the literal words, "This is my body, this is my blood." And so this argument and this relationship between the words of A Mighty Fortress were brought to me by Dr. Albert Culver. He has this great analysis of the sacramentarian controversy in relation to A Mighty Fortress. And Dr. Culver III serves as the Director of Church Relations, and he's the assistant to the president of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in St. Louis. And so he gives a verse-by-verse analysis to support the Lord's Supper inspiration for A Mighty Fortress. So in this controversy, Luther argued that there was nothing more true and certain or powerful than the Word of God. And indeed, the Lord's Word is a mighty fortress. And in the battle between Luther and the sacramentarians, the Lord's Word was the trusty shield to defend against their error and the weapon used to fight against them. And then the evil foe was using deceit and deep guile to obscure the words of Jesus. Let me read the first verse of the song. "A mighty fortress is our God, a trusty shield and weapon. He helps us free from every need that hath us now o'ertaken. The old evil foe now means deadly woe, deep guile and great might are his dread arms in fight. On earth is not his equal." And so he relates some of those words in that first verse to talking about what's going on between the reformers and the Lord's Supper and how it should be interpreted. So in verse 3, we start off, and the verse starts off, "Though devils all the world should fill, all eager to devour us." Luther truly believed he was living in the last days because the preaching of the gospel, that we are justified by grace through faith, and the scriptures were clearly taught. However, there was controversy after controversy and just a lot of shifts happening at that time. And the world seemed to be full of devils perverting the Lord's teachings. And so the stanza continues on, and it says, "One little word can fell him." So in the case of the controversy over the Lord's Supper, the little word that can fell the devil is. From the Lord's words, "This is my body, this is my blood." And finally, in the fourth verse, the hymn concludes by confessing that The word they still shall let remain, nor any thanks have for it. In Luther's day, there was the very real danger that he could lose his life, his possessions, his reputation, his family. Nevertheless, at the end of the verse there, he sings confidently, "Our victory has been won, the kingdom ours remaineth." So I just found that interesting, that Dr. Culver was able to look at the words and think about the controversy that was going on in Martin Luther's lifetime with regards to the Lord's Supper and the literal translation of the Bible, and think that when Martin Luther was writing the words for A Mighty Fortress, he was thinking about those things, and he was thinking about the Lord's Supper, and just that one word in the Bible created this faction of thought on what Jesus really meant. And so he believes that maybe A Mighty Fortress was inspired by that controversy. One thing is for sure, Luther's hymn is one of comfort and hope in the midst of trial and temptation and the strife that goes on within the church. So, A Mighty Fortress appears in 600 hymnals, and it is one of the most translated hymns in the history of the church, and it has been translated in over 200 languages. And crazy enough, in the English language, there are over 80 different translations. And part of that is because it's a very difficult hymn to translate, because when Martin Luther wrote it in German, the words he used were just so vivid. The original German is so vivid. So everyone interprets that just a little differently. And the most popular version or translation is done by an American, and it was done by Frederick Henry Hodge. And those are the lyrics that we're going to listen to today as we listen to A Mighty Fortress is Our God, performed by the youth of Fountain View Academy. I hope you enjoy this.